Hello, John Patterson. How you doing?
Hello, are you there, George?
Yeah, I've just started recording at this end.
Okay, I was just making a coffee. Listen, I've got some good news today.
Yeah, can we do the recording and then do the chat about other things? I've got
Ready when you are.
Okay, so, you know, I talked to you about Klaus Moser the other day, the chief statistician for the country for 30 years.
Yeah.
And his Nazi roots and his Jewish background, and how after 4 months in an internment camp he was released into the power base that he still holds, and how that man has run his companies from the second chamber in the House of Lords, and currently on the Financial Register he has got a net negative value for his company of something like £150 million. That's for a series of companies that he runs from within the second chamber at London, in Westminster, and those include the Institute for Policy Studies, where you have people like Dave Prentice, McCluskey, and a whole creche of politicians that are right at the top of the food chain. But the other day when we made the relatively peripheral video about Klaus Moser, I did not have the images ready. Today I've got them right in front of me, and I'm now showing images that, like Feuerhop, who was Tiny Rowlands, he was released right at the start of World War II from the internment camp, and after the war he's now 92 years old. He has billions at the bank, overlaps with Linda Rothschild, is a fellow of the Royal Society, and is chief statistician for the UK for several decades. Is an artistic director in many companies.
92 years old.
Yeah, and he's still very active in the House of Lords. I met one of the House of Lords at my place of worship, one of the places of worship I go to on a Sunday, and he knows of this person. The person I was talking to in the church was a former head of the Conservative Party. I will not give his name, for he's there for other reasons, for his devotion. And so I find it quite a scandal that someone who's in charge of government propaganda, i.e. the statistics of how well our country is faring, which are so twisted now on daily news bulletins that they are basically unbelievable, that this person is an overlapping director with the Rothschilds, and he was a director at NM Rothschilds and Sons Bank between 1978 to 1990, where he served as vice chairman at that bank between 1978 and 1984. And the name Moser is very close to the name Moses. So on the images that I'm now showing, which were not in the last video we made, I'm depicting Moses, the Jewish visionary, in the bulrushes very early in his career. And on the top left of that image you'll see that I'm depicting Santa Claus, which is a fictitious figure that Christianity has dreamt up, since Christianity was dreamt up, so that we can make a vast fortune as retailers from selling Christmas presents for a messianic icon that never actually existed. We have made videos on that theme several times, and you understand the Piso fraud and its role in breaking news even today, how reliant the news agencies are on covering up that massive religious fraud. Anyway, let me take you through the things that I did not have available the other day. So Moser moved to England with his parents in 1936. He went to Fresham Heights School and the London School of Economics. Despite being Jewish, in 1940 he was interned as an enemy alien in Highton Camp. After 4 months he was released and served in the Royal Air Force. 1943 to 1946. He then returned to the London School of Economics. The focus on his science and his statistics is in the economic sector. He became a reader in social statistics, a professor of social statistics, and a visiting professor at various institutions between 1970 up to the present day. He's director of the Central Statistics Office. He was made a Knight Commander of the Bath in the 1973.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah,
George,
all of the puppets in the regime are brought to the top of the regime by the same team players, and they have the same vicious roles in society. So this is going to take almost an hour, this video, so let me just move quickly through it. As well as being a director at the NM Rothschild Bank, this man is a leader in education. He's a member of the Paul Hamlin Foundation, which has got quite a lot of money at the bank. His year of birth was 1922. His director ID for that company is 900 589 824, and his registered address for all of his companies is the House of Lords, Westminster, London. Yeah, they've got tremendous amount of front.
The other guy, are we?
Yeah, just like he does out of the House of Commons. SW1AOPW. Okay, so he runs the most expensive private school in the country, and I was quite stunned to learn that the name Purcell is associated with an elite Jewish school, because it is an elite Jewish school where they bring on musicians to become leading figures in the arts and the music, classical music sector. Let me just list some of these companies: the British American Arts Association Limited, Oxford Playhouse Productions Limited, the Hermitage Development Trust. Remember the links to Russia? The links to Russia, the links to the Rothschilds, and the links to Henry Kissinger through that route.
That's it.
National Numeracy, that's the statistician's number. Glyndonborn Arts Trust, Paul Hamlin Foundation, Asconas Holt Limited, National Centre for Social Research, the British Museum Company Limited, where we've got a lot of other people's treasures and artefacts. The Purcell School, where the fees are £30,000 a year.
Fantastic.
It's a secondary school. It's not a university. It's not as elite as Oxford, but it's more expensive to get your secondary education there, because you're launched into a very powerful Jewish artistic sector. Okay, the other companies are, I don't know what the relevance of this are, but the Otto Schiff Housing Association, Cats and Dogs Domain PLC, Acre 246 Limited, the Oxford Playhouse Limited, Yehudi Menuhin School Limited in brackets the Jewish Care Pension Trustees Limited, the Oxford Playhouse Trust. Okay, next image. It shows Moser again in the bulrushes and in the Santa Claus uniform with a bundle of parcels on his back going into chimneys. It shows pictures that are very like the images of Gollum in the Lord of the Rings movies, and it shows pictures of Mrs. Thatcher with Jewish leaders in the Austro-German Jewry en bloc, and I've got a series of citations on Jacobitis Grin, and I forget what the actual source of all of that stuff was. It's called the Fickle Grey Beast, and you can get the links between Moser and the leading British religious clerics in Britain to Mrs. Thatcher from that website. So the Fickle Grey Beast website. Okay, I'm just going to go back to full screen because it's too small for me to see there.
Beyond belief, isn't it?
Well, you now know that, you know, my family, when we celebrate Christmas, we go on a massive binge to purchase things that we cannot really afford.
I gave that up years ago.
And the nativity calendar now comes from Marks and Spencer's. and you realise the irony of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you realise that the New Testament was written by people who are Jewish rabbis. We'll come to that in a few slides' time. Education costs money, but then so does ignorance. The next couple of slides focus on the crimes against British students, but I want you to know that that website covers the links between the Jewish clerics and Mrs. Thatcher and the boiler rooms that she ran from the Finchley region, which is the Jewish sector of London. Okay? This is not about anti-Semitism, it's about asset stripping sovereign countries of everything that their citizens work for, and then are rendered jobless, and then are culled in the conflicts that ensue. It's as simple as, and it's as plain as the nose on your face. And the burning bush that is mentioned after the Moses sagas, you can see that all of the nomenclature here is a joke in the Old Testament at current world leaders. The burning bush, you remember that, where the tablets, the rules that the politicians always break, were handed down from God. Okay, the next image is of Marks and Spencer's, where Mrs. Louise Patten, that's Lord Patten's wife, that's Lord Patten, the criminal at Oxford, the criminal at the BBC, the student theft leader, the governor at Hong Kong. His wife is a director, or was a director for some years at Marks and Spencer's, with Miss Elizabeth Manningham Buller, the head of GCHQ.
It was interesting that on 7/7, survivors were taken into Marks and Spencer's.
Yeah, they think it's really funny that the sheeples don't know what's happening to them.
Exactly.
But the sheeples are all poor, and these people are obscenely rich. That's no consolation to Lord Patten since he had his heart attack, but they've all got it coming to them. At the bottom of the image, I've got the Able Danger logo, and I stress that that is a global network dedicated to uncovering treasonous acts against humanity. And just to the right of that, we have an image of the Pope, the new Pope from Latin America, who was involved in the Caravan of Death genocides and Operation Condor genocides, and gave confession to convicted generals who were convicted of genocidal crimes. He's depicted, though, in this very recent photo with the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is the son of Winston Churchill's private secretary and was a former oil executive. And the next image shows Justin Welby with Her Majesty the Queen, who is God's representative in England. At the top of the image, have they shut me down?
No, someone's trying to call me.
All right.
It's okay.
You just going to ignore it?
Yeah, I'll have to.
At the top of the image, I've got.
This is important.
I've got a picture of my response from Her Majesty the Queen to my letter to her, exposing when she met for the first time the official cabinet members in a meeting that was prompted by me, in correspondence involving the Prime Minister in Whitney and Ken Clarke, and his statements on condoning rape under certain circumstances, just around the time he was made Minister without portfolio. They then held a meeting in the Parliament building in Westminster with Her Majesty attending, and at that time I sent 2 letters to the Queen, and she confirmed receipt, but her aides just said that there was no way constitutionally that the Queen, as the monarch in a constitutional monarchy, could interfere with her own government's crimes. She meets Cameron once a week, and she's either too stupid or too simple to see what's happening to her citizens, which is making her and her family entirely unpopular, or she is just in the money stream for the hell of it. And it is a desperately dangerous place now that the anti-treason researchers realise what they're doing. The rest of the page is dedicated to nativity calendars, those that are released by Marks and Spencer's now, where Miss Manningham Buller was also a director. Okay, so you've got the whole of the religious world in a profiteering cabal with constitutional monarchies and with open democracies, and as in America, where there is no monarch, but as you know, because of Greg Hallett's exposures, that they are still paying their taxes from the empire state, which is America, to Britain until the middle of the 2040s. Is that correct? You remember Hallett stating that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm now going to go to the next image, which is of Moser's 90th birthday celebration. Now, I bombard, who's the man that does the history programs on the telly? Melvin Bragg.
Yeah.
Melvin Bragg is clearly a big wig and a former student at Wadham College. Moser was a student at Wadham, and they are celebrating his 90th birthday on Saturday the 10th of November 2012, with Melvin Bragg making the lick the arse speeches. And the image of Moser looks just like the image of Gollum in The Lord of the Rings, and they are surrounded by silver and treasures. And at the front of that image I have a statement by Moser which says, "Education costs money, but then so does ignorance." And then there's another quote from him: "Teachers affect eternity. No one knows where their influence stops." The next image is of rising student debt, where there was no student debt at all in 1995, and now you have the figure for an honours degree rising to £50,000 on average for every British victim. And then in the bottom right I've got a picture of Lord Patton, the criminal, the profiteer at Oxford, the profiteer at the BBC. I've got a picture of the Sun saying "bye bye chump" to one of his quislings at the BBC when they got into the paedophilia scandals that they used to cover up all of these financial crimes. And I've got a picture of Jimmy Savile with his patroness, Mrs. Thatcher, who 4 times nominated him for his knighthood and got it the year that she supplied the arms to the Iraq and gagged the government on the money that she raised by selling weapons to the RSA, using David Cameron as a salesman in the delegation with David Kelly.
I'm now going to... He was 24 years old.
Okay, so there's a lot of information there that was not in the last image about Moser. And remember that Moser is a businessman running his business from the House of Lords in the geopolitical manipulation sector. Then there's the revelations about Captain Mannering and the joke about Mr. Simon Man-Wearing Robertson, who's an overlapping director also with Miss Lynn Forrester de Rothschild. They run a whole portfolio of business scams, including the Economist Newspaper Limited and the Economist outlets and outlets from the London School of Economics.
The amazing thing is, George, whether it's David Cameron's great-great-grandparents or the Rothschilds, right down to the present day, their descendants are still brutalising the world.
Oh, you should hear about Michael Grade's friends. It is shocking. And I've got images of the Dad's Army characters, because the names Hodges pop up later on. We've got the names Dresdner Kleinwerk Limited. That was Hitler's bank. That was the bank that funded Auschwitz, and they are now got subsidiaries back in the Frankfurt region where they came from, and the overlaps with the HSBC are phenomenal. We'll move on to that in a minute.
Yeah.
Oops.
Well, they would just find 1.9 billion for laundering drug money for the Mexican drug cartel. Yeah, well, when I read just the entry on Wikipedia on the Dresdner Bank, and you see the links to Nazism, and you see the links to Hans Georg Bogislaw Hoffmann, who's a drugs magnate. You know the name Hoffmann La Roche? Yeah.
And you'll hear the name La Roche coming up again, and all over these slides you've got Mainwaring, 1.5 trillion at the bank for these various organisations. Dresner, secretaries are Ponzi schemes, 27 branches in London alone, and it is just absolutely illicit. During the First World War, the London branch was forced to close. Isn't that a terrible thing from a business context, John? That the two combatant sides have to close one of the profiteering banks in a capital city during the conflict that they are currently engaged in. Yeah, and I've got images of the planners of the wars, World War II, Churchill, FDR and Stalin sitting right in front of Beaverbrook, grinning like a Cheshire cat with the pen in his hand.
Yeah.
And the cigarettes or the cigars in all of their hands, because everything they did was for profit, including the manipulation of the tobacco sector, which they see as a joke now. Okay, and I've got pictures of internment camps and people with skeletons for legs. Yeah, it's not faked up. These are genuine, authentic Pathy News style images that were released when I was a boy and shocked the boy.
You had Bomber Harris. He destroyed all the supply lines.
Yeah.
So no food was getting through.
And it's the same with the civil shipping. You know, they brought the colonies of ships down to keep the numbers down and to starve the people. And you can see that the supermarket and retail policies today, with Lidl's being a German company, and with all the supply routes, all the lamb comes from New Zealand, a lot of the milk comes from New Zealand and Australasia now. It's all automated out there. We cannot manipulate the prices of our own milk market here. We've had strikes in that sector this very year. Okay, and we've got a statement on this. You know, the Gazprom thing has been a major factor, and the Dresdner Bank has attempted to get an operating license in St. Petersburg, where former KGB agent Vladimir Putin was in charge of foreign economic relations. So they're talking about Putin being a menace again. This is all premeditated, and it is not planned in Russia. It is planned in the Rothschilds' mansions and financial institutions globally that they now run. As
they're like that, nothing changes. Nothing changes.
Yeah. Okay. So then there's the Mainwaring statistics, and I've got the links to Simon Mainwaring Robertson. I noticed that the use of the word Robertson, and I think it used to be on jam jars. You remember the Robertson jam jars where it was a gollywog? I don't understand that joke, but it plainly is a joke for them.
Well, Robertsons used to have a picture of they used to call it a gollywog. Do you remember that?
Yes, yeah. So that's politically incorrect now, but I'm not really sure what they're laughing at. But the man that I revealed...
It's alright, they had to remove it in the end.
So the man that I revealed of living within 2 miles of me and as being involved in the Arab British Chamber of Commerce, who I've never met. Some of the worshippers on the weekend said he did not exist. Others said that he was in the town, and they gave me his explicit address, which is actually mentioned in his Wikipedia profiles and his LinkedIn profiles. So this man does exist.
Well, he does exist, and unfortunately people know where he lives.
So I just want to skip through, but the net worth of this man, Simon Mainwaring Robertson, at the HSBC Holdings Limited, is the net worth is 91 billion, and the liabilities and the assets are 1.57 trillion.
Oh, my leap.
Yeah, it is just you know, when
this is just, hang on a sec, George, just get my head around this. This is just one person.
Yes, if you look up
what was that figure in trillions again?
If you look up HSBC Holdings PLC, you'll find that they have assets, a combined assets value of 1 trillion 576 billion £694,359,159. 1.57 trillion.
This is fantastic.
Yeah, this is what Gordon would not talk about. And if you look at Simon Mannering Robertson's holdings, Universal Specialists Limited, Rolls-Royce Group PLC, like Goldman Sachs International, so you've got the major banks rolling up together into conglomerates. St Paul's Cathedral Foundation, back to the religious theme that we started on. The Friends of Covent Garden, the opera theme. The Royal Opera House Foundation, Investis International Holdings, London Stock Exchange PLC. Gordon would not talk about that. Gordon would not let us expose the world leaders in case his trickle down disappeared. Okay, Royal Opera House, Berry Brothers, Economist Newspaper Limited, the HSBC Holdings PLC. The next exposure is of the London Stock Exchange PLC, which you can look up, and you'll find that Miss Michelle Monty is a director, Sir Anthony John Tennant, a relative of the Doctor Who dynasty, Sir John Kemp Welsh. You should see the statistics on how many pounds he has at the bank. Sir John Reginald Hartnell Bond, Sir Michael John de Rougemont Richardson, Sir Simon Mainwaring Robertson. Yeah, same man, same massive fund.
How do we explain to these families the food banks where their money's gone and who's got it?
Well, I've explained to you that the vicar who's in the intensive care unit in my local parish, where the man who may exist and may not exist lives within 2 miles of me, I've asked whether or not I can get access to the food bank, because I have no income, I have no prospect of keeping the ownership of my own house, and I would like to know where the food bank operates from. But it's just a myth. It's like all the charitable things. They raise the funds for it, they raise the profits from it, and somebody at the top of the food chain gets to tuck it away. All of the foot soldiers work like slaves, and they think it helps them save their souls, but it is just an illicit profiteering exercise. And when they sell it off through the missions in India, where they frequently get quakes in that region, they pick one person from that impoverished community for greatness, so that that one person can be like Malala for Gordon Brown, come and make speeches and demonize Islam, so that we can go into World War III and forget all about London Stock Exchange PLC's financial crimes. The other directors that I want to list are Mr. Peter Sackerill Wilmot Sitwell, Mr. Robert Anthony Metzler. Remember the Rothschild film? Metzler.
Metzler.
Yeah. Mr. Rudolf Gottfried Müller, which is Miller, which is part of the religious joke and the grinding the bones into flour laugh. Mr. Stephen Paul Cook and Mrs. Jane Victoria Barker. Now, if you listen into the next sector, you'll realise that Barker is a leading name in the writing and the revision of the English version of the Christian Bible. Did you know that Barker was one of the revisionists?
I didn't know that.
Okay, it's very important.
Rewritten, but no, I mean, you're naming names, George. This is incredible.
But you do know about the Barker jokers, Barker and Ronnie Balfour Corbett,
of course,
and the Chipping Norton set, which is the Prime Minister's drinking club. So let me tell you about the patron saint called St. John. You know, because I'm fascinated by the religious fraud, as you know. I deeply understand the religious fraud, probably better than any citizen on the globe. And what I find out about Spanish Christianity on the weekend was just a shock. it shocked me to my very...
It shocked you?
Yeah, it shocked me. So the patron saint of Spain is St. John.
Oh, cheers.
Yeah, now St. John does not occur a lot in the Bible. There's contention about who St. John is, like all biblical characters, because you've got concurrent writing of a fraudulent text about people who do not exist, and there's gaps in their timelines, and there's gaps in the logic which are massive. But when you convert St. John to Spanish, you get Santiago. Santiago. You get the Latin American city, which was the victim of a massive earthquake in the period when Chile hosted the Football World Cup before the event in 1966. And I remember me telling you about Pinochet returning from Bolivia that year. So that's why they had the massive quake, and that's why they are having all across America at the moment. They have the Madrid fault line, and the seismic events that are occurring in America are really quite spooky. But let me read you some of the literature. After returning, so St. John was killed. He was one of the first martyrs in the faked up stories in the New Testament. After returning to Palestine in 44 AC, he was taken prisoner by Herod Agrippa and tortured to death. You know, a bit like the beheading this week. The king forbid to bury him, but in the night Jacob's disciples stole the body and brought him in a sarcophagus of marble on board of a small boat. So like Boromir in the Lord of the Rings. You understand the Boromir joke? Boromir, Boromir, Boromore. Yeah, it is cynical. The current of the sea drove the boat to the Spanish coast into the port of the Roman province's capital of Eric Flavia, one of the authors of the New Testament. If you read the Piso story carefully, here the apostle was buried at a secret place in a wood. Do you understand the wood joke now, John? The Christian cross, the nails in the wood, the wood when you get an erection. When you get a boner, you get the wood. It is all a joke at Christianity's expense. This bit is even more vicious. Centuries later, in 813, that's almost 1,000 years after the fictitious Christ was written about, the hermit Pelayo listened to music in that wood and saw a shining. For this shining, the place was... Yeah, you remember the movie? For this shining, the place was called in Latin Campus Stellar. Field of the Star. The name that was later on turned into the culmination of the joke. Do you get it already?
Go on, sorry George, what was that again?
Compostela. Yeah, so a crock of shit with a lot of shining white stuff coming out of it. The shining is a pit of compost. And they make a film with a manic looking man in it, and then you understand that when they start the pilgrimage sector, which got the tourist economy in Spain really taken off, because I've got South African friends that talk to me about it at length, how their elderly mum walked across the whole of the Pyrenees because she was a devout Christian, and it cost her a fortune. And then when you read the websites for these various things, you should look up the website all about Spain, Galicia, Santiago de Compostela and sightseeing. And then you will get the jokes that were shared in America in the 1960s with American citizens, like Geronimo and the Fonz. The Colegio de San Geronimo and Collegio de Fonseca. You remember the Fonzie comedy?
Yeah.
It's a joke. It's a joke about. It's a joke about a monastery that was built in the 15th century in Spain, so that pilgrims, like they do in Mecca, and like they did when Jesus' family went to Bethlehem, they were there as a function of their tax-paying roles. It is absolutely cynical. And the picture of The Shining I will publish on my website in due course.
This is just cutting edge stuff, George.
Well, the next bit, as you would probably have predicted, takes us back to the originators of all of the religious myths. Can you guess at this stage who the originators and the key sponsors are for campaigns like these?
This is your Calpurnius, isn't it?
No, it's your actual monarchies. So if
this is after, yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to visit the shrine of Santiago, and you want to go to the most northwestern part of Spain called the Finisterre, the end of the world, and you need to do that if you're a devout Christian, and you will then see the images of Santiago, St. James, and the massive, sinister looking, it looks like one of those venues for Dracula, the monastery does. It is just quite spooky looking. And I've got a picture of a pair of my favourite soccer boots that I used to wear throughout my entire rugby career, which were Adidas Santiago boots. Yeah, little did I know at that time that I was laughing at the fictitious Jesus after having conducted part of my career. Before there was no mini rugby in my day, we learned as hairy young adults. We learned it at school and we learned it as teenagers. But then, when you look at the bottom of this slide, you see the pirate's hat that the Pirates of the Caribbean and Santiago used to wear, and you see the Jewish hat which is worn in the Lord of the Rings film. And that peaked cap, which was worn by wizards and Jews, was also worn by plague doctors. You might have seen that in Wikipedia already.
Yes, of course.
But the main image on that slide is of the Spanish crown. It's in revolutionary red with lots of gold and with lots of pearls. Can you remember where the pearls came from, John? We made extensive videos about that.
The pearls?
Yeah. The Spanish fleets that were sailed out of Spain and into the South Pacific with
El Nino.
El Nino. They swapped the pearls for a little Barbie doll of the baby Jesus. A little plastic icon which was worthless unless you're a devout Christian.
That's up on your website, isn't it, George?
Yeah.
All about that.
But the irony is that if you now want to go on the Santiago pilgrimage to the Pyrenees and cross the country, you do it on an elite train, which is owned and run and strictly for profit by the Spanish monarchies that sired some of the British monarchies and are now walking with sticks in each hand.
King Juan Carlos.
Yeah, you've got it.
Yeah.
The cost of the pilgrimage is €3,825, but you get posh dinners on the train with the crown pictured on the side. You can see how religion works for the monarchies, and you can see the importance of the kings like Saul in the Bible, and you can see the importance of getting rid of the kings for countries like America, where they pretend that they have a republic but are still paying their taxes to the British monarchy even as we speak. And then you see on the next image the picture of the pirate's hat, which is the same hat that I used to wear to the fishing in New Zealand and that Indiana Jones wore before he broke his ankle When God is on our side, and all the events that are focused on in the news, including the seismic, the volcanic, and the Baba Boomba eruption in Iceland, yeah, I can explain that later. It's linked into the Fifth Element joke that has been shared, and movie directors who are involved in vicious directorial scams. We'll move on to that later. We'd better probably make 2 separate videos tonight. Would that be sensible?
George, this is just fantastic
stuff. Well,
whatever you want to do.
Let's finish the religious bit, and then we'll get on to the hard criminality in the financial services sector, because it is quite shocking. And it's taken me 2 or 3 days to get it together. So
well, George. I mean, when you think it couldn't get much worse.
If you look up Catedral de Santo Lego, now the Lagos jokes, that gets you into all sorts of nomenclature issues, but that's translated in brackets as St. James, and it's in Santiago, in Spain. It is just, no, it's a museum, it's a church.
Okay.
It is like a golden treasure trove. So all of those things that they got in exchange for the baby Jesus icon on the beach, or what they killed the natives for with their sacks and their new viruses that were brand new in the South Pacific.
Exactly. All
of the gold was taken from those countries, and if you go to the Cathedral de Santo Lego, St. James, in Santiago, you will be physically sickened by it, because it is just an illustration of how they have stolen the world's wealth.
It's funny how the Chatham House Tavistock Institute is in St. James Square, London.
Yeah, well, it's no accident. They think it's really funny until intelligent people like you and me get together and start dissecting it on behalf of the impoverished world.
Yeah, we're treading on dangerous territory.
Well, it's too late to bring the pagans back, but I know that God is on our side. Everything when you discover these things and you see the sun coming pouring onto your computer keyboard, when you get the gist of how the villainy works, and you see an image of St. James in the Bible, and he takes a cockle shell with him. Now, as if St. James the Pilgrim might never have seen the sea. You know the joke about the cockle shell?
No.
It's in. If you pick up a cockle shell on the beach and you put it to your ear, you hear the sound of the sea.
Yeah.
Now, a man that was fictitious and was written about in a fictitious narrative, which is the New Testament, and was one of the victims at King Herod's hands at the time when King Herod had already joined the Roman Jews in Rome, as part of their plot to write the New Testament. You can see the sickness of the joke. The man is wearing the cockle shell on his pirate hat, and on the image below I've got the images of Magellan ships, and you know that pirate hat became the cowboy hat, and it became the hat that the people in the cowboy sector wore as they culled the Native American Indians, like the Indians in the South Pacific. And Indiana Jones thinks that he had an accident when he broke his ankle. I know that God precipitated that, because what has happened is that every pagan nation that God planted in its appropriate place on this beautiful earth that we were given in this massive universe that the gods created, they have been displaced by violent criminals, so that the cathedral at Santiago can be lined with gold and pearls. It just makes you sick.
It does make you sick, George. It's just, I mean, I know a lot of this stuff, but you know, the way you present it, and when I hear it again, it just, I can't even describe how I feel. So
the next one is just a follow-up on the El Nino, in the context of how the New World Order have faked that up into a weather crisis. I know now that if you get a thunderstorm or a lightning storm, that there's human behaviours behind that, I know now that if you get a volcanic eruption like you got in 79 AD in Naples, where the New Testament was written in the Villa Papyri, then you begin to understand that acts of God are very, very real, and that biblical floods are very, very possible. But because the Bible was written by humans, we have no way of knowing the accuracy of that. It's like reading The Independent or The Guardian.
Of course.
It's a strictly for profit exercise in writing. Yeah. And I've got all those images of the icons of the baby Jesus and the violent weather patterns in the Philippines and the flattening of Christian churches, but the leaving intact of the beach upon which Magellan was killed by Lapu-Lapu, which is only 5 miles away from where the churches were flattened.
Exactly. As you know, George, I'm not home at the moment, so I'm recording. Fortunately, it hasn't dropped out once. But I've got a black screen.
Well, we're not onto the financial bits yet, but I'm
just saying, I'll put the images in afterwards. It'll take a long time, but this is incredible stuff.
But I want you to know that this is not entirely a historic narrative. The article that I'm reading the headlines from now was published April the 1st, 2014.
Fantastic.
Massive 8.2 earthquake rocks coast of Chile and creates tsunami. So I've got the pictures of the town in Chile, and I've got all of the seismic evidence. Do you know that that happened in April of that month? And it happened on April the 1st, which confirms for me that God has a sense of humour.
Oh, no question. No question.
Do you know what April the 1st is known as it's the Joker's Day in the English speaking world. Do you know what it's known as in France?
Go on.
The Poisson d'Avril.
The fish.
The fish of April. You're back to the penis. The fish. The fish on a Friday joke, which is sex on a Friday. The day you get your pay packet, you get the favours of your wife. If you're really lucky, you'll get a second coming on a Friday.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it is cynical, it is sick, it's a joke. God understands it. So when he creates the 8.2 earthquake, he creates it on the day of the Poisson d'Avril, to shake everybody into their senses that he's awake, or she's awake, or the entire team's awake. There's no way that humans can understand the gods and what makes them tick, no matter what the Archbishop...
Look at the other chap who tried to say he knew more than the universe, Stephen Hawking.
Oh yeah.
Look what happened to him.
Yeah, I forget the man who was... What is it? God is Great. He died this year as well. You know, and when you look at the life of Brian, Father Ted, and all of the people that take the piss out of, you know, the religious dedication of innocent people, they spend their entire life in prayer, in charitable functions, thinking that if they are good people in the eyes of the Archbishop of Canterbury or Her Majesty the Queen, God's representative in England, that their souls will be saved for it. Yeah. And I've got the 1961, before that quake last year on April the 1st, the biggest quake in world history was in the lead up to the football tournament in Chile in 1961. It was the Valdivia earthquake, and that was the one when Pinochet returned to Chile from his training in the paramilitary sector and in the genocidal methodologies in Bolivia, and let me just see what else we've got.
He was best friends with Margaret Thatcher, wasn't he?
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground that we've covered before in videos, but the next bit will be revelations even for you, and it all came from Wikipedia. I asked you to read the King James Bible and its history on Wikipedia, and I've summarised what happened. Now, I cannot give you in detail. You know, King James was a baby king.
So George, did you want to make another video?
No, this is still religious. We'll carry on until we cover this. So the Bible in English, Old English pre-1066, Middle English 1066 to 1500, Early Modern English 1500 to 1800, Modern Christian 1800 onwards, Modern Jewish 1853 onwards, and miscellaneous. Okay, now what I've got begun in 1604 and completed in 1611. That's the King James version of the authorized Bible. Printer was Robert Barker.
Oh,
yeah, let that resonate in your head for a little bit. Robert Barker. The importance of the Barker joke to what we currently have in Great Britain, in inverted commas, is really, really vital. Okay, you get names like F.H.A. Scrivener, D. Norton, Spottiswoode, Tynedale, Eyre, as in Peter Eyre, Jane Eyre, a whole series farther of Matthew. The translation was done by, listen to the numbers, 47 scholars.
Oh yeah.
47, what does that add up to, John?
11.
Yeah. Oh, 11 scholars. Yeah. Okay. And they translated it from Greek and from Hebrew and Aramaic. And then you've got the names Benjamin Blaney at Oxford doing revisions, Churchill Springer Spaniels, and the Springer Publishing Empire. And then you've got F.F. Bruce. You remember the Bruces in the Braveheart film? The guys that did the dirty on him in the end and conspired with the people, the parents that had the leprosy, and that had all the infighting amongst the nobility in Scotland, that was prepared to desert Scotland as if it was in a referendum situation and just work for themselves. Okay, so F.F. Bruce suggests it was probably authorised by order in council, but no record of the authorisation survives, because the Privy Council registers from 1600 to 1613 were destroyed by fire in January 1618 to 19. A bit like the JFK Memorial Library the day of the Boston bombing. Nobody noticed that it happened. Nobody noticed the JFK burning.
Yep.
The next bit is a joke that I've failed to understand since I was a child. I now understand deeply the beautiful film which was my favourite for many decades, The Sound of Music.
Okay.
The escape into Salzburg from Austria of someone who was called into the Nazi forces in World War. They lived very, very close to Autobahn 999 near Hitler's nest, and they escaped over the Alps into neutral Switzerland. And you know all about neutral Switzerland and the Red Cross and the laundering operations that were masterminded from there.
Yeah, Templars have been there since 1291.
Yeah, but the King James Bible is also involved in a Swiss subplot. The King James Bible is used as the name for the 1611 translation, on a par with the Genevan Bible.
Yeah,
you knew about that bit? The translation happening in Switzerland, or the Rhemish statement, and in Charles Butler's first published 1797 translation. You remember the importance of the name Butler, and we've been discussing it in recent weeks. Rab Butler, Was he the inquest for the arms to Iraq scandal, or was he the inquest chair for earlier munitions scandals? He's a top earning civil servant in the British system, and in the Gone with the Wind jokes that was made in 1939 before they engaged in the cull, you know, in parallel with the 39 Steps movie. And you understand the Rhett Butler jokes, and how that America was torn apart and the black woman had her red revolutionary petticoats tucked away under her black skirt. It is just a series of vicious jokes. So when I read about the Genevan Bible, then I remembered the comedy that I always thought was a bit of a drag about Genevieve, the old car.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes.
And now I entirely get it. Now you entirely get the fact that if you can have the Queen as God's representative in England, why not have a joke at the parishioners by launching the Genevieve film and make them think, well, it might be a little bit funny to somebody, but I don't really get it. So
that's my ex-wife's name, Genevieve.
For 40 years I've been puzzling to think, you know, why would they make a crap movie like this? It's not even funny.
Yeah, it was crap. That's all I can remember of it.
But now you understand.
I think it was 1967.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, we came out the cinema, and right next door is a pub called the Genevieve. I mean, it's. Yeah, that's all I remember of it. It was just a crap movie.
My history is very weak, and so for that reason I'm going to bring this bit to a close quickly.
Okay.
But I've become aware that dogs and cats are icons, and you know that the King James that survived the beheading of his mum, who was Mary Queen of Scots, that he was likely to be a homosexual according to the Wikipedia profile.
That's right.
And when you see the people,
they all are.
When you see the people that manipulate them, like Lennoxes, like what was the name that we just used for the Bruces, and some legendary names like Murrays in Scotland, or Murrachs, or Murraghs, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. But what they're in control of vassals or courtiers who manipulate that young prince so that he has no mind left when he becomes an adult, and the entire thing is run by a cabal of profiteers that are prepared to kill to keep their power base. So they killed his mum, and then they launched the Protestant religion in Scotland and the John Knox concepts and all the Lutheran doctrines, and you've got religious warfare. And I was quite stunned when you find that King James, when he launched the Christian Bible, there are two different versions, one for the Church of Scotland and one for the Church of England. Why would the first king to unite the entire kingdom of Britain opt for two religions if it were not a for-profit exercise or for bigotry opportunity to get people into strife again? Exactly. And then I learned
nothing changes, George. Nothing changes.
Well, King Charles was one of the people that came into power, and then they got other forms of revolutions, and the King Charles Spaniel is an icon. Winston Churchill always owned King Charles Spaniels. And who's the one in America who had dementia? Reagan. Ronald Reagan.
Oh, Reagan.
Yeah, they've got. You see, look at the images of the world leaders and spaniels, and you'll see that it is a joke about the Orange Revolution and the culling of the Catholics and the coming into power of the Protestant nations. But that is all just one facet of the religious divide that is the religious master plan, that is centuries old and is still wreaking havoc across the whole of our potentially civilized world. It builds hatred, it builds massive profits for people that are the perpetrators of false news. And when you're...
These people are on dangerous grounds, George, because this is out now.
Well, if you and I had to engage with the Archbishop of Canterbury in single-handed combat, I would feel quite safe that the world is in safe hands. The Archbishop of Canterbury is a little, public schoolboy twit, and you could blow him over if you sneezed on him.
Yeah.
But he's prepared to pontificate that he will give loans to the homeless at only 80% interest when Wonga give 4,000%. Yeah, the man is a little shit. There's no other word for it. And he professes to be an activist for sub-Saharan African poverty, which is entirely imposed by Britain and the Western nations. Let me just see what is on the next slide. This is a good one, because I'm a great fan of the Thomas More film. What was it? A Man for All Seasons. Have you seen that?
No, I don't think I did, George.
You should watch it. Thomas More is like you and me. He's trying to get his message across to the whole world, but the only thing that Thomas More does not realise, which makes me feel a little bit nervous about the whole movie, Thomas More does not realise that the New Testament is a fake. He lives his entire life for Jesus Christ and Christianity and what the Pope thinks in Rome. Now, can you see how mistaken that is, to put your whole of your moral faith? But when as we move our way through the film, we get to see that the nation was sold to a chap called Richie Rich, who compromised himself. He convicted Thomas More of treason or some such, and in the end, because he told lies at his trial, Thomas More was beheaded. It's a nice story, like the Braveheart story, and it brings tears to your eyes. You should watch it sometime.
Yeah, I will do. I'll make a note.
And the man who plays probably the biggest villain is a chap called Cromwell, which is a villainous name across the whole of Ireland and across the whole of England. But there were several tyrannical Cromwells. There was one who fought in the Roundheads and Cavaliers crisis, and there was another one that brutalised Ireland for the land grabs. Both of them were hated. They were different persons. Okay, and one of the villains in the Thomas More movie was the Chancellor, and his name was in Henry VIII's day, was it Chancellor Wolsey?
That rings a bell, George.
Yeah, so he wore a red papal outfit, and round his neck the Chancellor was given a chain of office. Do you know what the golden icon was on that chain?
Are we talking about the cross keys?
No, it's a currency issue.
Oh, the peso.
No, that's a very logical guess. That's a joke about the Piso family and Latin America's currencies. But the answer to this one is the shilling sign.
Oh, really?
Which actually is the current dollar sign. So it's the letter S.
Interesting.
Hung round the Chancellor's neck in his chain of office. And on this image that I'm showing now in front of the camera, I've got that grinning twit, George Osborne, who could not find number 11 Downing Street when he only had 3 houses to choose from. And another image of the pounds, shilling and pence. There's a poster that spooks me in the real estate sector in my hometown. You remember the name of the man that crashes the pension funds, Stormouth Darling, Peter Stormouth Darling?
Yes. Is he related to Alistair Darling, George?
I don't know. There's no way that I can. It's very difficult to find such things out because of the way that they change the initials and they change the spelling of their surname, and because Rifkind is Rivkind, but you know that sounds ever so Jewish, so you would not want that if you were a conservative. But what you see is that with the Chancellor's chain, you see the evolution of the currency icons. So it's the dollar sign round the Chancellor's neck, and you see the evolution of the pound, the LSD.
Yes.
Pounds, shillings, and pence, and D, which is the Deutsche symbol. And it all takes you back to the common root from Frankfurt, where the Rothschilds came from. They think it is ever so funny, and when the Chancellor holds up his red suitcase in the photo I've got on my version of this video, what has it got on the front of it? A golden image of what? This is the Chancellor for Democracy. It's got a golden image of the Crown. Like all the law enforcement people all across Britain, in the law courts, in the police, they work for the Crown.
Exactly.
So we are still in a tyrannical monarchy, like we were in the Dark Ages. And I think that's just about the end of the religion. But we can start another video on another theme, and it's about my exploration of the name Jehovah.
Well, listen, George, let's wrap this up. I need to get a coffee and go to the...
Okay, I'll stop this one now, and that is really good because it explains a lot, and it is quite the Christianity joke and the martyrdoms, the genocides, the anti-Semitic campaigns that have ensued from all of those things, and the culling of the entire world's pagans is a tragedy that we can never recover from. But it needs to be understood because of the power base. And you said divide and conquer. We are now on the verge of World War III because of the demonization of Islam, because of what the profiteers are doing from the Parliament buildings. They are ashamed of themselves, and they will take the world to war to cover up that shame. Shall we stop this one now?
We're stopping now, George.
Okay,
Fantastic.
cheers.